Welcome, we're continuing our journey through Daniel chapter 11, and in this video we'll be covering verses 22 to 23. Let's give these three verses a complete read through as they serve to introduce Antiochus IV. Quote, "In his place shall rise a contemptible person, on whom royal majesty had not been conferred. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom through intrigue. Armies shall be utterly swept away and broken before him, and the prince of the covenant as well. And after an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully and become strong with a small party." End quote. Let's now break down verse 22. It says that armies shall be utterly swept away and broken before him. About this, Newsom writes in her commentary, quote, "Although the reference in verse 22 to armed forces being swept away suggests military action, there is no other evidence to suggest that Antiochus fought his way to the kingship. It may rather be that this phrase is a general characterization of his kingship as a whole." End quote. Now, some commentators take a slightly different interpretation of this verse. Remember back from our previous video, the way in which Antiochus took the throne was with the backing of the king of Pergamum, Onias II. His forces came up to the border of the Seleucid Empire, and since our sources don't report any conflict, it seems that Heliodorus simply retreats. So, therefore, interprets verse 22 as armies simply withdrawing from fighting against the might of both Antiochus and Eumenes, allowing Antiochus to take the throne. So writes, "King Eumenes II of Pergamum, with his own political agenda, decided to back him for the Seleucid kingship, furnishing him with money and troops for the expedition home, ostensibly to reclaim the throne in the name of his family. Whatever opposition forces were left, both within and without Seleucia, fell before him. This probably explains the allusion in verse 22, where the Hebrew expression translated as armies in the New Revised Standard Version is literally arms of the flood." End quote. Let's now finish up reading verse 22. "So armies shall be utterly swept away and broken before him, and the prince of the covenant as well." Now, it's widely accepted that the Prince of the Covenant is referring to the high priest at the time, a man by the name of Onias III. So, in his commentary, writes, quote, "Among those who fell victim to him was one called the Prince of the Covenant, probably an allusion to the high priest Onias III, who apparently had pro-Ptolemaic sympathies, see 2 Maccabees 4, 1-6. Jason, a brother of Onias, backed by the rich and powerful pro-Seleucid Tobiad family, was able to bribe the king for the position of high priest, see 2 Maccabees 4, 7-10. So let's pause here a moment. So we have Jason, who is a brother of Onias III, and he bribes the king for the position of the high priest. Therefore, Jason gives Antiochus money, and in return, Antiochus bestows the high priesthood upon Jason. We continue to read in so, "Antiochus agreed to the deal, but only until a better one came along, in this case from Menelaus, who would later offer a higher bid for the office." End quote. So now we have another man, Menelaus, who, just like Jason, bribes Antiochus IV, but now with even more money, and in return Antiochus IV takes the high priesthood off Jason and gives it to Menelaus. Writing on this matter, Newsom writes the following, quote, "Although the high priesthood was hereditary according to Judean custom, the Seleucid king confirmed the high priesthood in office. When Antiochus IV came to the throne in 175 BCE, however, Onias' brother Jason bribed the king to appoint him as high priest instead. Jason also introduced Hellenistic institutions to Jerusalem, a move that was apparently rather popular at the time, though later condemned in the strongest terms by the writers of 1st and 2nd Maccabees, see 2nd Maccabees 4, 7-10. In 172 BCE, however, a rival from a prominent family, Menelaus, offered the king even more money to make him the high priest." End quote. Let's now move on to verse 23, which says, "After an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully and become strong with a small party." About this verse, so writes the following, "Verse 23 probably alludes to the deal with Jason, but surely not to that alone. The Hebrew word for alliance in 1123 is an abstract noun. It may refer not to any particular event, but to various means of connection. The point is that Antiochus is able to use such means, the Hebrew says literally from connection, to advance his purposes through deceit." Thus, this verse calls attention to shady deals such as the one he made with Jason, but also to deals that he forged with Eumenes of Pergamum, with Menelaus, with various political allies and would-be enemies. Bluntly put, Antiochus was a wheeler-dealer who came to power from disadvantageous positions and with limited resources." End quote. Therefore, when verse 23 says that Antiochus became strong with a small party, this could really refer to any of these connections, and most likely to other alliances we're not aware of. Now, to finish up this video, let's read through the 2 Maccabees 4 account of this constant changing of the high priest. Quote, "Later, when King Seleucus died, and Antiochus, known as Epiphanes, became king, Jason, the brother of Onias, became high priest by corrupt means. He went to see the king and offered him 27,000 pounds of silver, with 6,000 more pounds to be paid later. The king gave his approval, and just as soon as Jason took over the office of high priest, he made the people of Jerusalem change to the Greek way of life. Jason also did away with our Jewish customs and introduced new customs that were contrary to our law. With great enthusiasm, he built a stadium near the Temple Hill and led our finest young men to adopt the Greek custom of participating in athletic events." 3 years later, Jason sent Menelaus, brother of the Simon mentioned earlier, to take some money to the king to get his decision on several important matters. But when he stood before the king, Menelaus impressed him with his show of authority and offered him 22,500 pounds of silver, more than Jason had offered for his appointment to the office of high priest. As a result, Menelaus returned to Jerusalem with papers from the king confirming him as high priest. But he possessed no other qualifications. He had a temper of a cruel tyrant and could be as fierce as a wild animal. So Jason, who had cheated his own brother out of the office of high priest, was now forced to flee to the land of Ammon." End quote. As always, if you're enjoying these videos, your support would be greatly appreciated, so please consider supporting me on Patreon. Find the link in the description below. If donating isn't something you're able to do, it's still tremendously helpful if you hit that like button and leave a comment. And finally, make sure you're subscribed to get my next video. Thank you for watching until the end, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.